passage from the book titled Surprised by Joy, written by C.S. Lewis. Now, my goal is to engage as much as I can while reading through this passage. In particular, I'm going to be taking quick notes about the passage and really asking questions as I'm reading, making sure to take note of anything that confuses me or something that has some information that I feel like I can somehow relate to, or maybe something I've even seen or heard of. So really the goal is to take notes and engage as you read. I'm going to be reading out loud and moving through this passage to provide you with an example of what we'd like you to do in the following passages. So let's start. I call it joy. Animal Land was not imaginative. Okay, I'm going to pause there. What is Animal Land? That's confusing. Maybe I'll find out later in this passage. Let's keep going. But certain other experiences were. The first is itself the memory of a memory. As I stood beside a flowering currant bush on a summer day, there suddenly arose in me without warning, as if from a depth not of years but of centuries, the memory of that earlier morning at the old house when my brother had brought his toy garden into the nursery. Okay, this sentence is really beautiful, but it sort of reminds me of life growing up and made me think about my own brothers. Okay, moving on. It is difficult or find words strong enough for the sensation which overcame me. Milton's enormous bliss of Eden, given the full ancient meaning to enormous, comes somewhere near it. Okay, I'm going to pause here. I know Milton. Milton was this guy who wrote some famous stories. And I have a feeling he was, gosh, I can't think of any stories now, but I do know that he was a guy who wrote some famous stories. I do know that. Okay, let's keep on moving. It was a sensation, of course, of desire, but desire for what? Before I knew what I desired, the desire itself was gone, the whole glimpse withdrawn. The world turned commonplace again, or only stirred by a longing for the longing that had just ceased. Okay, that sentence there, that has a lot of information. It's a little bit hard to unpack. I'm going to say a little confusing, but I think it means like this feeling that you get and then you get distracted and then the feeling goes away. I think? Question mark? Okay, we'll continue on. In a sense of the central story of my life is about nothing else. The quality common to the three experiences is that of an unsatisfied desire, which is itself more desirable than any other satisfaction. I call it joy, which is here a technical term and must be sharply distinguished from both happiness and pleasure. Okay, so here now, joy is not happiness or pleasure. So we're kind of moving, it seems here, towards defining joy. All right, let's keep going. Joy, in my sense, has indeed one characteristic, and one only, in common with them. And I'm guessing that's in terms of happiness and pleasure. So them here, I'm going to do a question mark. Happiness and pleasure? Question mark. The fact that anyone who has experienced it will want it again. I doubt whether anyone who has tasted it would ever, if both were in his power, exchange it for all the pleasures in the world. But then joy is never in our power, and pleasure often is. Interesting. So now joy is never in our power. So I guess we can get joy, question mark, but we can easily get pleasure. Okay, so I'm going to take a break here from writing and just talk a brief second about this passage. This passage, for one, was really jam-packed and it was loaded with lots of philosophical ideas. You probably won't experience a passage this vague and abstract on the Praxis, but I really think it's a great passage to practice engaging in your reading. You'll notice here quite a few different comments that I've made, just jotted down to help me kind of grasp or better tackle what's happening and what's going on with this passage. And this is exactly what we want you to do within these next passages. Engaging in your reading is super critical whenever tackling a Praxis paragraph.